teacher and chair of the English department. And I've been at CA. This is my 23rd year at CA. I teach English. I have been a coach. I am a parent of a senior and a junior. I've advised clubs, have been a class advisor. So one wears many hats, and I love it all. Did I cover everything I'm supposed to? I think I did.
Allison?
Hi, everybody. My name's Allison OBrien. I'm a member of the English department. I started at CA in 2002. I took some years away during that time, but it's been its 20th anniversary this fall. And I live in Arlington, so I'm off campus. And I do a lot in creative writing for our upper level students. And I've also traditionally taught 9th grade English.
Carmen?
Hi, good evening. My name is Carmen Wilton. I'm the chair of the Modern and Classical Languages Department. I teach Spanish, and this is my, I think, 8th school year at CA. And I reside on campus. I live in one of the student houses with my family. I've worked with clubs and advising and coaching, and as we all do, participate in a lot of the aspects of life here on campus.
Ed?
I am at Rafferty. It's my 12th year at Concord Academy. I'm a member of the history department. I am a parent of 3 CA graduates in 2019 and 2 in 2021. And I work in the boarding program, and I also coach, and I've coached a number of sports in each season at CA.
Great, thank you. Could I ask for each of you, for one person from your department, to just talk a little bit about the program, the requirements, courses offered, goals for students, and any distinctive features you'd like to point out? And just a reminder to those in the audience, please add questions to the chat, and I'll be sure to ask those of our panelists.
I'll go first since nobody else seems to be jumping in. So I am lucky enough to be the chair of the English department, and the sort of basic organization of the English department. Well, first, let me say our goal is we have a few goals throughout the course of 4 years. One is to help kids basically just learn to pay attention to the world and to figure out how to work collaboratively in groups. That's sort of the most fundamental thing that we're working for. And we use literature and drama and poetry and creative writing in that process. We start with 9th grade English, which everybody takes, and that's really the foundational course. We work on building skills. We work on how an individual can be a strong student of English, her, him, themselves. And then we also work on how to intentionally build a collaborative learning environment. Sophomore year sort of takes that ball and runs with it. Kids master the analytical essay in that year and start to figure out different ways of expressing mastery, blending creative and analytical styles. Once a student reaches junior year, our junior and senior electives are 1 semester mixed 11-12 electives that are based on genre. For example, we have a creative writing course and a poetry course and a memoir course, or based on a period or a particular author or a theme. And so kids are able to choose courses that really appeal to them. And kids take 1 each semester. Some kids choose to double up and even take more than 1 in a semester. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Make sure we have time.
I can go next. So the history curriculum is wonderfully expansive and very much also balanced by depth. So that's, I think, one of our unique characteristics. We start with, asking questions about what history is and what historical thinking is in 9th grade, really introducing students to practicing history and asking the right questions, introducing them to primary sources, secondary sources, different kinds of textual and material culture, and just some deep dives into a variety of different area studies, specialties. We offer everything from Native American history to migration history to Latin American, etc. It's a broad range that rotates every couple of years. We continue developing critical historical skills in sophomore year with more of an emphasis on the early modern era. And then once we get to the upper level, we start to really do a lot in terms of thinking about how history is practiced in various kinds of institutions, museums, the academic setting, public history, and offer opportunities for collaboration with those institutions and putting out student work into kind of the public sphere. We have 5 semesters of history that we require everyone to take. Most students take a history course every semester because we've got such a strong program. We really do try to create interdisciplinary opportunities because history is such an interdisciplinary field. I'll just leave it at that, and we can talk more about the specific types of courses we offer.
So to speak to our Modern and Classical Languages program, we offer 5 languages at CA, Spanish, French, German, Latin, and Mandarin. The students are required to complete through level 3 of their chosen language. And so I guess one of the primary goals we have for students at CA is that by the time that they've completed that requirement, they have active proficiency in the language of their choice. That means different things in different languages, but typically means that they're able to communicate in any of the modes of communication, right? So speaking, listening, reading, and writing are comfortable ways for them to express themselves in the language that they are studying. Let's see, what were some of the other things I was going to say? After level 3, we offer a series of electives in each language. Every language that we offer, all 5, have at least 4 advanced electives that students can choose from. So once they've completed the requirement, most students choose to continue on with their language and pursue the advanced courses, which are not like numbered beyond 3. So they might choose to take them in different orders, and in some semesters, yes, in some semesters, no, because they're semester electives. And so there's a lot of choice that opens up to them after they've completed that 3rd year. And the last thing I would mention is that something particular to CA and the language experience is that it's very common for our students to choose to double in their language study and to pursue a second, sometimes even a 3rd language while they're here. Sometimes that means that once they've reached the level 3 of one language, they then start from scratch in a new language. Sometimes we have students who might be heritage speakers or native speakers in a language, and they jump in sort of midstream with a language that they're picking up, and then they return to their native language to take an elective. All sorts of combinations of language exploration happen, but our block scheduling can accommodate that students do that without compromising their access to other courses. So those are some of the sort of key features of our language program.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And you did a great job of answering a question that had appeared in the chat. So thank you, Carmen. Can I have someone speak a little bit to course selection? So one of the questions in the chat is asking, do you have first choice as a senior and then a junior? Would someone just like to speak to how students go about signing up for courses and everyone's favorite period add drop?
I can jump in on that. I think, first of all, it's a time that advisors work closely with students. So we really try to spend time helping each student figure out the best path for them and create a personalized program for them. So we actually start that when they're in 9th grade, having them map out a 4-year plan along with actually, signing up for specific courses for the next year. And then we're asking them questions like, what are their goals? What's important to them to make sure they do? If there's some class they're really eager to take as a senior and there's a prerequisite, we want to make sure that they take that when they're a sophomore or junior. So they get a lot of support from their advisor as they're doing that process. Does that speak to the questions, Marie?
Yes, and I think people are interested in digging maybe one more level deeper to understand, do students really get the classes that they would like to get?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think largely they get a top choices. We use a sort of an algorithmic system that allows them to put in their top choices with sort of the older students having more weight so that you do have a little bit of a preference as you get older. So a senior would get some priority over a younger student. And I think then if they don't get into the class, we have this period called drop add when there's a lot of shuffling that goes around. So they sort of, if they don't get it right away, they can get it. I would say it feels to me like usually if there's a class they really want to take, it tends to happen, which doesn't mean they'll necessarily get all their first choices in all their subjects. But I have found anecdotally, and anyone can jump in if they want to add to this, that when a student is really committed to taking a class, it usually works out.
And I'll just add, having spoken to the new scheduler over the summer, he said that at least in English, something like 90% of the kids were able to get either their first and second choice or their first and third choice or their second and third choice of all of their courses that they took. So that's pretty remarkable.
And I would just round that out by saying, I've discovered, at least with my advisees, there are times when they're in that, it's my second choice, and they love it. I think I can say this, I'm not in the classroom. Our teachers are really amazing, and as the way in which they approach the topics and how much they love the subject matter, even if it maybe wasn't your very tip-top choice, I think by the end of the day, people are really happy with the classes that they land in. There's an interesting question here that I have to confess I'm not even sure that I have the answer to. So I look to you. Do we have any academic related traditions at Concord Academy? I thought that was really interesting as a school that doesn't have any awards or honors. Maybe someone could speak to something like departmental studies or the senior project option.
Yeah,
I can.
Or
Go ahead.
please.
Go ahead, Sophie.
No,
I can speak to, so senior projects are a common thing that seniors have the option to do. They must apply to do it in the fall of their senior year. And it takes up a course, it replaces a course in the spring of their senior year. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a tradition, but it's become a fairly popular and a common practice in the senior year. They work with an advisor on basically a self-designed curriculum and project that they produce something at the end. And then by the spring in May, there is a show, a demonstration of what they produced. And generally we have somewhere lately between like 30 and 40 senior projects that are produced, and there's a senior project fair. And I'm on 2, advising 2 in the spring. And to give you a sense of the range, one is a mathematical modeling project that's joint with a math teacher and a history teacher on thinking about political science outcomes in war and diplomacy, but using mathematical modeling to do some of that work. And the other one is about the history of indigenous boarding schools, particularly in New England, but not exclusively in New England. So there's a wide range of what students can do in those projects.
Great, thank you. Another question, what are some of the greatest challenges that 9th graders grapple with in your department or in the classes that you teach?
I can say something.
speak. Oh.
Carmen, go ahead. with.
Well, I was just going to speak. This isn't specific to my department, I don't think necessarily, but I also advise a lot of ninth graders, and I live in a house full of them. And I think the thing I see most ninth graders struggle with the most is big time management and figuring out how to balance all of the things they want to do with all of the things they have to do, and trying to make the most of the experience here without compromising, their sleep and their health. And so figuring out that sweet spot. And I think one thing that we have moved to in the past few years is having the ninth grade fall semester be a pass no credit semester. And so that alleviates a lot of the pressure on them in that opening semester, away from, grades and making sure everything is like top notch, exactly how it's supposed to be, to more like, okay, here you are, figure it out, let's settle into this experience. And by the time the winter rolls around, I think a lot of our ninth graders have done exactly that and are ready to take on the more formal, okay, and now I'm in it for real, here are the grades, they're going on my transcript, this is it. And I think that that's one thing I would see. And maybe specific to my department, another thing I've noticed over the years is sometimes students who are coming, we have students coming from such a wide range of middle school backgrounds. When they get placed into, for example, a language level, it might not be necessarily what they were anticipating, or I think just sort of the transition to high school can sometimes feel different than one would have, and one can't maybe imagine it fully. And so sometimes that's another piece of things, is having new students arrive and really sort of wrapping their mind around okay, here's what I need to do, here's what I'm going to be accomplishing. And so you do see some I guess falling into place happening, specifically with things like, okay, what level of the language should I be in? What level of math should I be in? And those sorts of things. What does it mean at CA to be doing it at this sort of level or track?
Great, thank you. Did anyone want to add anything else?
I guess I'll just say, I don't know if it's a struggle, but sometimes it takes some getting used to for ninth graders who are used to sort of, many of them anyway, just sort of working hard on their own and doing it their own way. And thinking about getting used to being part of a community where everybody is as curious as they are, where everybody wants to be there as much as they do, and where there are a lot of people who can act as a resource to them, and figuring out how to use those resources well. Some of it is time management, and some of it is just sort of assuming that the skills that you brought in from middle school are all going to work. And many of them do, but not all of them do. And I remember saying to a ninth grade advisee this fall who said oh my God, I did horribly on a math test. I said, that's great. And he really wondered why. And I said, well, look, there's no cost. It's a pass no credit semester. So if you didn't study well, let's talk about how you can study better, right? Let's talk about how you can make use of this and talk to your teacher, develop a relationship with your teacher. And for this kid, that was a kind of a revelation, but it's something that really characterizes CA education, is that kids connect with teachers, both in class and outside of class, to get help and to grow in their subject. So I think it can be a challenge, but it's also a real opportunity for kids coming into the school.
Kopi, did you want to add something?
Well, I'm so glad that Ayers brought that up, and it also piggybacks on some of what Carmen said. There is a lot of different outlets at the school, both extracurricular, socially, academically, and it's a challenge to figure out how to prioritize, what you need to do on a week-to-week basis. So I think that acclimating to that is definitely a transition for ninth graders to figure that out. And then self-advocacy is something we really try and cultivate from the get-go at CA. And it's a wonderful time to figure that out, because adolescents are figuring themselves out. They're figuring out who they are as independent people in the world, and learning what their resources are, who they can have relationships with in terms of their friends, in terms of adults, and remaining connected to this community while also cultivating a voice for themselves is really, really important, and something that we try to grow in every aspect of the school, and definitely in the classroom. We are all small class sizes. we encourage discussion and working out questions and problems through discussion. So you have to be kind of a collaborative learner, and that's something we teach, and we find that kids really flourish in their learning, and they develop a love of learning by doing that.
Great, thank you. People are interested to hear a little bit more just about writing across the curriculum. What is writing like for our 9th graders? What is it like in some of our more writing focused electives? And also just a little bit about the flow of assessments here at CA. So how often might students have a paper due, have an in-class assignment, have a test? What does that look like as it unfolds for our kids over the course of a week or two?
I can take a bit of that. One thing on the flow of any week to week is that you work closely with an advisor as well as our learning management system to know what assignments you have on any day-to-day basis, and then over the course of a week or 2 weeks. And you work with your advisor to know, like, oh, I might have, a few assignments in a week that happen to be due. And, if you have more than 3 in a day, those can be adjusted based on, which one might be moved at any one particular time. I would say, like, for my class, you probably end up with, in addition to nightly homework for we have 3 classes a week. So 3 nights of homework for each class. Probably a paper or a larger piece of work that's produced probably every 3 weeks, roughly. It can vary a bit depending on the unit and depending on what we're doing. In history, it's a writing intensive curriculum. So most of what I would say 98% of what we do is writing, whether that's starting in 9th grade to focus on the paragraph, and writing a good solid paragraph and using sources to do it, to building up through the curriculum to longer and more sustained pieces of prose.
Would anyone like to add anything? Ayers?
I mean, I could speak for way too long about writing at CA. I think Ed probably nailed it. Around every 3 weeks or so in an English class is about how often kids do things. Although in the 9th grade, it is more frequent. We do much more frequent, shorter things, especially in 9th grade fall. So kids are doing something almost every week and a half, so that they can get a lot of feedback. There are kids have a term of crunch week, right? Which is when in the best of all possible world, they'd have something from Carmen one week and something from me the next week and something from Ed the next week, but it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes that's the best time to start to think about how your advisor can help you plan your time management. Oh my God, I've got way too much work is followed by, well, okay, so let's write it all down. Like, how do you want to spend your time over this coming weekend? And what are you doing in your free periods? And maybe you could only, hang out with your friends some of the time and do work some of the time. We still want you to build friendships and make connections. And we also want you to figure out what your academic life is going to require of you. So crunch weeks are another opportunity to sort of take on sort of ownership of your education.
Thank you. And that actually gets at another one of the questions in the chat. And I didn't know if anyone had anything to add to the notion of how do we really help kids balance their workload well through those crunch weeks or otherwise.
I can speak to that. Our advisory program is incredible and unique. each of us have a group of advisees that we ostensibly can carry through the 4 years of their career at CA. Of course, students sometimes switch advisors because we really encourage strong connections with adults at CA, and students might decide another adult is a better fit for them, and they're free to do that as they get to know themselves and their community at CA. But the advisor and the advisee interaction is something that is predictable and supportable, two things that adolescents need in high school on a weekly basis. You sit with your advisor, and then every few weeks you can sit with your advisory group, which is, comprises of folks at different grade levels. So you get to learn from peers in 11th grade if you're a 10th grader, and 9th grade if you're an 11th grader. It's back and forth across the grades, and you can talk about classes, and you can talk about crunch week, and you can talk about sports during those opportunities. Teachers are often in touch with advisors first if there are any kind of issues that come up for a student, or a student is either celebrating or struggling. Either way, the student teacher advisor triangle is something that is pretty consistent throughout the student's career, and students know this, that their advisor is their first link to other adults in the community and other resources in their community. So that kind of support, which is really about cultivating trust, and therefore cultivating kind of autonomy, is super important to how we grow kids at CA.
Carmen?
Yeah, I would just add on to that. I was thinking exactly the same thing, and then it made me realize that another place where you see a lot of this kind of sort of scaffolding of the experience of time management, and particularly around academics, is in the houses for boarding students, and in the boarding experience. You really have house faculty members who are on duty in the evenings into the night, talking through with students decisions they're making about how they're spending their time. We have a formal study hall every evening that students are required to go to attend. And that's a time when we really get a lot of data about how students are sort of using their evenings, for better and for worse. And so those are two other sort of touch points that boarding students have. And also day students can stay for study hall in the evening as well, and many choose to, so that they can do group work, or just because it's a good studying environment. We have a beautiful library that they might want to sit and take advantage of, that's more conducive to studying than home perhaps. And so there's a lot of opportunities sort of in addition to the really important advisory relationship with adults, but also with peers. We have peer tutoring that happens during study hall. We have other sort of groups that are connecting students across grade levels, so that kind of like older student support can happen. Clubs are another space where younger students and older students might be commiserating / giving each other good advice about what to do when you have an English paper, a history paper, and a math test all coming at you the same week. And so those are just some more sort of ways in which I think there's a lot of there's a big safety net here.
I would also add that the advisor is the point person for families as well. So if you ever have a question as a parent or guardian about how your child is doing in a variety of different kinds of ways while at CA, you can certainly reach out to the advisor anytime. As already was very well stated, that advisor is in touch with house faculty and with coaches and with teachers. So they're definitely an incredible resource. We meandered a little bit and talked about boarding and day, and then we actually do have a question about how sort of boarding students and day students relate to one another within our community. We're about 40% boarding and about 60% day. Who'd like to speak to that?
So and I'll share my perspective, which is as a day faculty. I am not terribly conscious of who is who. Because we close student houses during the school day, our boarders kind of go to school just like our day students, so that everybody's in classes together, everybody's at meals together, everybody's on teams and in clubs and other kinds of extracurriculars together. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for students to mix and get to know each other. Friend groups are not split into the two by any means. Yeah, so I think in a nice way, because it is, we really are a hybrid school, there's no one experience that dominates. It's not like it's a boarding school and there happen to be a few day students, or a day school and there happen to be a few boarders. It really is, sort of two groups that are both very much part of the life of the school.
And I would add too, as advisors, we're advising kids who are both boarders and day students. So because our advising program is one-on-one, even though we're assigned 7 or 8. And then occasionally we meet as a group. That's another way in which you're having boarders and day students interact kind of over time, in addition to classes, teams, clubs. There really isn't a division between day and boarding that is conscious in the school. So I would echo what Allison said too. If I don't look up a student, I don't necessarily immediately know, oh, that's a boarder, and that's a day student.
Thank you. So there are some questions about how advisors get assigned, when do we meet during the day, and being one of the culprits who actually helps assign advisors for new students. We in the admissions office, as we're moving students along and they are choosing to enroll at CA, we actually still know you best. So the admissions office works closely with the Dean of Students and the Student Life Office to do those initial pairings. And as was mentioned previously, if for whatever reason a student would like to change advisors, they do have that option and that opportunity to do so. Most students don't. Most students do stick with their original advisor, but that opportunity definitely exists. We have some questions just about what the classroom environment is like. So I think speaking to the size of the class, the layout of the classroom, teaching styles, people certainly are interested in whether or not we have a lot of group work or a lot of independent work, and do students help one another? So what's it like in the classroom at Concord Academy?
I want to hear what my colleagues say, but I just want to say it's awesome. That's why I'm still here. It's fun. I work my butt off, but the classroom is fun because the kids want to be there and they are excited to learn. And that's one of the things that I hear again and again when kids get here from middle school. Some of kids, as somebody said, kids come from a wide range of middle schools, but one of the most consistent experiences is something like, oh my goodness, it's actually cool to be smart and it's cool to be curious here. And that's what makes the classroom really kind of sparkle.
I would echo Ayers. Like, it's why I think all of us continue to do what we do and how much we love it. In my classroom, in the history classroom, generally, it's very discussion based. It's not precisely a Harkness table type design exactly, but the notion is whole group discussion. The notion is that it's student participation, it's student led. It's not a sage on the stage who is proffering knowledge to students. Knowledge is built in every class and every day by the interaction of the student and the teacher with the work that they happen to be doing, the reading, the task, the assignment, the paper, whatever we might be doing, with a very heavy emphasis on that interaction. So sometimes it's small group work, but often it's large. Well, large because Concord is small. Most of the classes are between 12 and 15 students. So the largest is about 15.
I would just name for language classes, we all have our own styles as language teachers, but what unifies us is that we're proficiency oriented. And so there's a lot of production of the language happening, whether students are speaking with a partner or are recording themselves for the teacher to hear, or working with a small group or the full class is engaged in something, the dynamic is oriented toward the students trying their best to use the language in an active and authentic way. And even at the beginning levels of language, if you walk through the language hallway, as you pretty much have to get anywhere else in the school, you hear all of the languages happening all of the time. The students are at it right from the beginning, except maybe in Latin where there's more English happening too. But still proficiency based in terms of getting the students to put everything into an authentic context. So that's our philosophy in the language department.
I'll just say one thing about history is we really try and stay current with contemporary trends, social, political, economic, and scholarship. So whatever it is we're teaching, even if it's ancient history, we connect it to contemporary perspectives. And that way students are involved in historical thinking that is widely relevant. That they're made to feel as if historical problems have stakes, that they have stakes in those problems, and then they're made to feel as if they can participate in contributing solutions to those problems. So for instance, this semester I'm teaching a migrations course, and even though I'm focusing this semester on the ancient period and next semester on the modern period for 9th grade, also making them cognizant, and they also bring this to me from the newspapers that they read and from other sources that they encounter, the problems that the migration crisis has brought to many borders. And so it's an active political, social, economic problem, right? 1 out of every 7 people on the planet is a migrant, right? As students coming into the world as adults, they're grappling with that. And we lay out in our history classroom the migrations lens in tackling historical problems, the arguments, the debates. So we're always trying to get students to understand that learning in the classroom is also learning about themselves and in the world and who they are in the world, and how what they learn is applicable.
Can I just say one more thing? Sorry. Just specifically about English classrooms. Our courses are all taught in a circle, intentionally. So there's no back row. There's no place for people to hide. And indeed, people are encouraged to find and deepen their understanding and their voice. We talk a lot about how we know what we know and recognizing the process, and the kids speaking their understanding is a way to learn about their own process and help others understand it. So we do a lot of sort of a progression of personal writing to small group stuff to whole group conversation, so that kids get used to hearing their voices, even in small groups. There's kids who come into CA who are already like they're Hermione Granger, right? They know the answer to everything, and that's wonderful. Sometimes those kids can be taught to learn even more by sometimes listening a little bit. And then the kids who are maybe a little bit quieter find space where they have the ability to jump into classroom and hear their voice in conversation and recognize that their perspective is important and in fact essential. There's a writer named Adrienne Marie Brown who talks about the fact that for every group, there's a conversation that only that group can have. And I think as teachers, one of the things we try to do is empower everybody in the group to be part of the conversation of that classroom.
Thank you. Another question, and I do have my eye on the clock, so we have time for another 2 or 3 questions. And one of them is, trust is a core value at CA. Yes, absolutely. How is that trust displayed in the student-teacher/student advisor relationship and in those interactions? So how does common trust come alive as we interact with our students? Just a little question.
I think, you know, when you ask kids about common trust, their first answer is, well, it means you can leave your backpack anywhere, which is true, and they do, which is sometimes kind of a hazard. But I think it's much more than that. It means that even in a 9th grade classroom, if I realize, oh, shoot, I forgot to photocopy that poem that I need for later in the class, I can actually say, hey, kids, let's all turn to page 209. Look at the first paragraph. I'm going to put you in groups for 5 minutes. And we're going to talk about how that sort of watches a character change perspective or something. And then I can leave the classroom. And this doesn't happen often, I promise. But when it does, I can come back and they're still working. That's common trust in action, right? That they're engaged enough in working that they want to keep on growing as students, and so they'll do it whether or not I'm in their room.
I can illustrate this with something that happened to me this week. I had an emergency appointment and someone was covering for me to take attendance. And that person had an emergency for the first few minutes of class. So the students at Concord Academy in my class, I had set them a task that they were going to do on our learning management system. The teacher who was taking attendance was late, although I didn't know at the time because the teacher had to attend to an emergency. Many people may have heard the old rule, well, if a teacher doesn't show up after 15 minutes, you can just leave. Well, that's not what CA students did or do. Instead, they did the work, they put it on the board, they took a selfie of themselves in the classroom. They took a picture of the board, they emailed the picture to me of what they did on the board. They then took the selfie to the attendance taker so that the attendance taker knew that they were all present. They went back in the classroom. By then the teacher had returned to do the attendance that they were late for, and they stayed and finished the work. That is a combination of both common trust in action and love of learning. Their desire was to continue to do that work. And then that evening, when I returned as a boarding faculty, I was covering study hall, they then showed me the selfie and said, here's what we did. And we want you to know that we did the work. And there was not a directive to do that. There was not a command to do that. There was not a higher power enforcing it. It was the joining in the community of common trust. That is what we do, because it's how we want to grow.
So I am going to round us out with a 2-part question for each of you. What attracted you to CA as a teacher or an administrator / why are you still here? And what's your favorite course to teach?
I'll go first. I can't choose a favorite course. It's like choosing a favorite child. We just, we put a lot of work into creating our courses, every time they come around, we teach them in the history department, at least, on a rotation every couple of years, and we update it so it's always new and current. But I will say that this semester, when I'm teaching a migrations course and a course at the upper level on global capitalism, currently they are my favorite courses to teach. They've been incredibly charged, lively debates. Students are super engaged. They're bringing in sources from outside the classroom, newspaper articles. They're just, in our global capitalism class, we're even talking about World Cup soccer. So it's just, everything's in the mix while we're doing some pretty tough reading that involves economic theory, labor laws, Marx, all of that stuff. So so that's my answer for the favorite course piece. And what keeps me here are really the students. Our admissions office does an incredible job in working with you all to bring in incredible students who want to learn, who are driven and multi-talented and multi-dimensional and want to explore and try new things. Students are actively engaged, and if they come here and they feel a little overwhelmed, we try to grow that in them so that their curiosity is piqued. They're looking to be connected with each other and the world. And that is so alive here. The spark is so alive. When the students go away for holidays, since I live on campus, I get sad and I can't wait for the energy to come back when they return. The students are it for me.
I can go next on that too, as a history department building up. Topi, they're all my favorite. I really can't choose a favorite course, or the favorite ones are the ones I happen to be doing in that particular moment. I think the thing that keeps me here is the way that CA allows the teachers and students to grow. I have the best job in the world. I get to read books with really smart students and talk about them. I don't know why someone would want to do anything other than that every day. So that's what I get to do. I get to wake up and read books and talk to students about them, and then find new books and talk to them about those. And they're smart, curious, engaged, and want to do that too.
I'll say what brought me here is also what's kept me here, which is just how much people really love learning. I know it's in our mission, but it's true. I think I see it in my colleagues and my students every day that people are just jazzed about whatever it is that they're learning and about trying new things and are really open to new ideas. It is hard to choose one favorite course, but one I'll mention is one actually Ayers and I both teach, which is called Creative Nonfiction. It's an elective for 11th and 12th graders that we typically run 3 or 4 sections of each year because it's quite popular with our students. And what I love about it is that it's we do a lot of work on personal essays. So I find it's a great way of really getting to know students and helping them learn how to craft their stories the way they want to.
So since Ed went after Toby, I guess I'll go after Allison. And it's funny because I was talking with a colleague of mine who was on this Zoom with me last year, and she said it took so long because all the teachers in true CA style had like 3 favorite classes. So I will name that Allison just actually talked about the class that I was gonna, which is creative nonfiction. Another favorite class is 9th grade English, because helping young kids emerge sort of into this community as thinkers and as collaborators is just incredible. Helping kids sort of find their voice and start to trust their own, understand and trust their own process as thinkers and learners is incredible. Seeing them learn to recognize that their classmates aren't competitors but collaborators and colleagues in learning is just incredible. And that's, when I came here to interview, I saw it in the class, and it's what made me take the job without second thought, and it's why I'm still here.
I think what I would add to all of this, a very real love fest for our amazing students, which I feel as well, is maybe the other side of that coin, which is the incredible autonomy I have as an educator here to build the classes that I'm excited to teach, and to teach them in the way that it feels true and like authentic to me. And so I think that that's the other thing that keeps me here, is knowing that I have this creative license to build curricula that speaks to my passion, to my interest, to my expertise, and to share it with students in a way that I believe is aligned with the most recent pedagogy, and that really kind of challenges some of the ways in which we have learned traditionally. As we come out of COVID, that's something that I've been thinking so much about as a teacher, is what are the ways in which we can shift some of the things we do in classrooms to better, serve students and ourselves as educators, so that we're all moving sort of more efficiently, more excited, with more enthusiasm and more sort of verve toward the learning that we want to do. And so sort of then thinking about, well, which of the courses I teach do I love the most? I actually think for me it's Spanish 3, which is like I said, it's like the class that they have to pass to be done with our requirement. Our requirement. And it's because it's a turning point class. And what often ends up happening is you have a kid who's like, all right, I got to get through this level. And then by the end of the year, if I've gotten them to be like, okay, so what are the electives next year? Like that feels like the biggest win. And it's exciting for me as a teacher. It's empowering for them as a learner to realize that the thing that felt like a hurdle is now actually just a stepping stone towards, you know, a future with this discipline potentially, or maybe not a future, but just like another class. And so I love teaching level 3. I think it's often something that people are daunted by. Oh my God, it's like this course that's like, okay, you don't quite have it fully yet, but you're kind of good at it. And I love that. I love that gray zone that they exist in while they're sort of right on the cusp of proficiency. So that's where I land. Spanish 3, great class.
I would just like to thank all of my colleagues for their time this evening and for giving even a little bit of extra time. I know we're a little over. I did just post this in the chat, but if there was a question that you had posted and I didn't get the opportunity to ask that of our panelists, please send it to admissions@concordacademy.org and we will pass that along to the appropriate folks to get back to you. We definitely want to be sure that you know all that you need to know about CA moving ahead. But again, thank you everyone. We really appreciate your time this evening. Take good care. And if we haven't seen you on campus yet, we hope to see you here soon. Good night.